Hello and welcome to Curious Conversations. We are your hosts, Carly and Mandy. Today we are talking about an 80s case, one that had some recent movement and an arrest was made.
Yeah, so we're talking about Jessica. Is it Gutierrez? Do I say it right when I say that? Gutierrez?
Gutierrez.
Gutierrez. Okay,
Yep.
I knew I'd mess it up right off the bat. So she was taken from her home at age 4. And oddly enough, it was supposedly by a man that her 6-year-old sister described as a man in a magic hat. And that always spooked me.
It did. That is definitely what grabbed our attention.
Hmm.
Um, I was picturing like the Mickey Mouse as the sorcerer with the,
Yes. Yep.
yeah, a magic hat. I was like, okay, you got my attention. Unfortunately, there are so many cases of missing children that I mean, it's easy to just feel like you're swimming in a world of evil. So when we start talking about a case, there's usually a curious aspect to it, and that
Mhm.
that caught our attention for sure. Um, this was 86.
Yeah, I
So
was 11.
you and I were both youngins.
Hmm.
I was
Yeah.
6, so I probably wasn't watching the news. I had no interest in that.
Yeah.
Um, but do you remember 80s, early 90s? Do you remember having a fear or any type of concern of being kidnapped?
Okay, I'll say this about that time period. I think they expected us to all die because there was the thing about being kidnapped. There was the thing about razor blades in your candy. There was
I
the
remember
thing,
that.
yes, there was like, that's a whole other thing. There were several things like, you better watch yourself. I don't know
Hmm.
if they just expected us to be wild or what, but the kidnapping thing for me was, I guess, there would be, I wanted to go walk alone. I remember that. Like I wanted to be out alone or I wanted to be with my friends and probably way too early. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like, no, you can't do that. Somebody will grab you up kind of thing. And I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure they won't. Well, I'm now that they will, it's terrifying.
Yeah. Well, we didn't have social media.
Right.
Newspapers were local for the most part. You were reading local news and, you could watch the news, but there just wasn't the coverage that we have now with, open internet. And so, you just didn't hear about the things as often. And being a kid, you're just like, what? That doesn't actually happen.
Right.
Um,
You
so
think it doesn't happen.
I don't ever remember feeling unsafe, but I will say I have learned over time that I think I'm a little naive
Mm.
about some things, and I'll tell you a story, tell you why I feel that I may have been naive and missed some stuff.
Okay.
Um, I lived on a square. It was over Rocker Circle, but it was a block, so there were two longer streets that were adjacent and then two shorter streets, and I was allowed to walk on three of the four. They were where
Okay.
all of the homes were. And then the fourth, it was attached to a bigger road. And I was not allowed to go on Ninth Street. That was a no, no. Don't step foot on Ninth Street. I
Wow.
broke
What was
the,
Knott Street?
it was just a busier road.
Oh, that's not where I was going.
No,
Knott
no.
Street.
I could have gotten hit or I don't know what,
Yeah.
my
No,
mom
that
was
makes
like,
sense.
no, don't even
Okay.
walk down the side of Ninth Street. There weren't sidewalks. So I will say that, that was
Yeah.
small. But I did go on Ninth Street because I had older
Of
friends
course
that
you
were
did.
allowed to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I'll just sneak. It's just real quick, from here to there.
Yeah.
Well, at one point we were walking. There were three of us, two older girls and myself, and I was, I don't know, 12, 13, 14,
Hmm.
maybe. I don't know, probably more like 12 or 13. And a gentleman in a van pulls up, like one of those, not a scary all white van, but it was like
Okay.
you know, and he pulls up and he lets us know that he was in Florida visiting his grandchildren, and he had purchased bathing suits for them and they didn't fit his grandkids, but they
Oh.
looked like they were our sizes and we could just have them. Well, I head to the back of the van.
Oh my
I was
gosh. No.
excited,
Stop. Stop, little Carly.
getting bathing suits. You
Yes.
know, and the two girls that I was with were like, no, no, thank you. We don't
Yeah.
want them, you know, and they take off,
Yes.
you know, they're dragging me across a yard and I'm like, but our bathing suits are back there, guys, you know.
Oh my
I might be
God.
naive.
So how creepy does that sound to you now? Like with having children? I know your children are older,
Oh,
but still, like, ugh.
no, I can't
Because
imagine.
if you're thinking practically, it's like, so he was just running around, just saw these girls. It's like, now that's a good fit right there. I
Yeah.
bet they're a size blank. That's I think that's called Silence of the Lambs, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, end up in a hole in somebody's house. That's
Right?
it's really creepy. It's not even this story and these kinds of stories are way too prevalent, and it's just if you allow yourself to get in that headspace, because I do this thing, you probably do too, where you start thinking of maybe how this person felt and how this child, what they were thinking and how they might have been confused, and it's just the worst of the worst to me with children. And well,
No.
anybody, but you know what I mean, children, they're just in their little bed. When I read she was like, in just the report, like 30 pounds, and I'm like, oh, it's just awful.
Yeah. Yeah. You just kind of, you don't know. Should I tell my kids like, hey, everything's out to get you, so stay vigilant? Or do you try to let them live that happy rainbow and puppies life and be oblivious? There's got to be a fine line there, but you know, you don't want to scare them, but you do want them to be aware.
Right. So, okay, so let's walk through this. It's been going through, but just quickly. So it was June 5th, 1986. So the kids are in bed, and the mom doesn't think anything's going on, and understand the next morning she comes in, and so the curtains had been ripped off the window, and papers were like just thrown across the bedroom floor. And so the 6-year-old sister says, when the mom's like, well, where's your sister? Says that's when she says that she was taken by a man in a magical hat. So I'm immediately just thinking, oh my gosh, why didn't you scream? Why didn't you? Of course, now in court, she's like, I was 6. I was petrified.
Mm.
I don't know. Have you ever been scared where you just felt like deer in headlights? I
Yeah,
can't
that
imagine
sit
this.
still and can't move.
Yeah, I have
Terrified
felt
moment.
that and not been in this kind of situation,
Yeah,
being this little. And you can't, what do you say to that? You can't
right.
really reason with that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, after that, I'm sure it was just immediate chaos. This mother just frantically, what do you do? Obviously you call the police, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, how that went. But yeah, that's how this got started. So I always, when I heard of this, I just heard of the hat thing. I think that's what stood out, was that magic hat. And like you said, you kind of picture one thing, and it sounds like some sort of dark fairy tale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, I'd like to see the hat. But essentially, yeah, we've got a 4-year-old Jessica Gutierrez, and she's in a room with her 6-year-old sister. Her mom worked as a postal worker. And you know, Jessica liked to sleep in mom's bed, but I think she had done that for a couple of nights, and mom was like, "Nope, tonight you got to sleep in your room, in your bed."
Ugh,
That she shared with her 6-year-old sister. I've heard there was another girl in the
yes.
room that they lived in a 3 bedroom, but that the girl never woke up. That would have been an older sibling, I believe. Um, but you know, Rebecca, that's the 6-year-old sister,
Mhm.
sees someone in the room pick pick Jessica up. Jessica never woke up and walked out of the bedroom door with her. So came in the window, was wearing a funny hat, picked up Jessica, and walked out of the door. And the child was scared to death, you know?
Yeah, this, can you imagine being scarred for life by this? Besides your sister missing, that you witnessed that. That's, like I said, that's like nightmare fairy tale. We were talking before about parents telling you, excuse me, about parents telling you, watch this, don't do this, blah blah blah. That's what the old fairy tales were. They were
Yeah,
warnings. Don't go wander in the
yes,
woods alone. Don't go to strangers' houses.
exactly.
That
That's
kind of
exactly right.
image. in my mind.
You know, you talk about just the damage that was done there, and I think Rebecca did as much as her 6-year-old mind knew to do.
Mhm.
You know, she
Sure.
was 6, she was innocent, and she should have been living in a world of rainbows and puppies.
Mhm.
And I wondered, what did she struggle with as an adult? You know, there had to have been some guilt, or did she think, "Gosh, I should have handled that differently? Maybe my sister would still be here." But how could she know that she wasn't in danger? You know, if she called out, how would she know he wouldn't come back in the room, especially if he came in the window and then he left through the bedroom door? She couldn't walk out into the hallway. How was she supposed to know he wasn't still out there? I can't imagine what she went through that night.
Oh, I know. Yeah. So you just don't have the privilege of reasoning at that age. I can't imagine. And maybe she thought it was a nightmare. I
Hmm.
don't know. It's just like the poor little girl not waking up. That's because at that age you're scooped up often. It's just pitiful to
Yep.
think about. Your body, might not wake up. You're just, you moved from here to there. You're little.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Just sad. Very sad.
so okay, let me ask you this because I know you had some thoughts on this. So you've got the whole deal too about how the police respond to the case, right? And
Yeah.
us judgmental people, we're always sitting here like, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? But let's talk about that a little bit. Do you feel like it was handled poorly or not fully?
Uh, so, there are good cops, there are bad cops, and everything in between. I think that every family that is in those circumstances that are just utterly horrific, they probably feel like law enforcement should be doing more. I personally, I don't think I could be a cop. I think it is a hard job, and I think you're
Yeah.
dealing with people at their very worst the
Mm-hmm.
majority of the time. Do I think that when you hear someone blame law enforcement, do I think they're spot on? No, not every time. I think, that there are um, circumstances and things that I don't know. You can't chase all of that. But for this case, there
Mm-hmm.
were some legal and professional repercussions that came about for the
Oh,
sheriff that was involved. Did you hear all of that?
I didn't hear all of that. I did hear some, and I heard about how the mother was handled just
Mhm.
insensitively, to put it mildly.
Yeah, you can read the transcripts. I don't know how I feel because the mother was rough. It was rough, but she was so very desperate.
Mm-hmm.
And so the sheriff, he got very frustrated, felt like he was, exerting a lot of energy, had stayed up working on this case, and then he's being attacked by this mom. Um, he handled it about like a human would handle it, but as a sheriff, you cannot. You
It became personal. It was a personal.
yes,
Okay, as far as a personal response, it was warranted. I could see that, but you don't get to do that. You don't get to do that as a store clerk. I mean, you're a
exactly.
business situation. You're supposed to handle it professionally.
Exactly, exactly. Well, and he went too far. I mean, even
Mhm.
no matter the circumstances, what he said was unacceptable. He did say, that if the mom didn't back off, essentially, and these are not direct quotes, I'm kind of just filling in, but if she didn't back off, that he would stop the investigation into her daughter's disappearance.
Yeah, when I read that, I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, who says that? That's like a bad argument with somebody you know.
Yeah,
Like, it's very irresponsible and immature response, really. Um,
it was immature and unacceptable.
You could have just said, you're hindering the investigation more than helping the
Right.
investigation. But I would be a total maniac. I would be nobody would want to deal with me. So
I know.
it's such a normal response. And she's going over this and what did I do wrong and how did this happen? And so let's let's look at like who were the suspects originally because this was such a mystery for so long. I mean, over 30 years, people are wondering, what happened? Who was this person? And
Yeah.
I believe they looked at the ex at one point. They looked at the ex-husband, like the
Hmm.
father, right? So
Yes.
there was that. I guess I'm not quite sure why there why this was such a long case. I'm kind of not sure why it took so long because it seemed like it changed
Yes.
with new people.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that this case was one that was just, it was mishandled a little bit, probably. That's me speculating. I understand there are some things that law enforcement can't do. There are things that they can't talk about. There are parts of investigations that they can't reveal to the general population. And unfortunately, there's just not enough hours in the day,
Mhm.
there's only so many investigators out there, and so I'm sure that is overwhelming. Um, and I think that's definitely why I feel so strongly for web sleuthing. I feel like it can be helpful, it can be effective. You can also mishandle a case if not properly trained, which can make things very difficult for the professionals that are tasked with solving these cases. But in this situation, there were some things that were red flags
Mhm.
for me.
Yeah. Well, do you want to say those specifically before I move forward?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
curious.
Well, so we have the guy that is now being convicted. He was tried, convicted, he's being sentenced. Uh, this guy was arrested on a rape and burglary charge of another person shortly after Jessica came up missing. Okay. When he was arrested, they did fingerprint him, and his fingerprints were the ones that were on the window seal of
Mhm.
Jessica's bedroom. That's a huge red flag to me. And the argument there was he dated mom. So of course they're going to
But
be
how
there.
long ago? How long ago did he date mom?
Yeah,
Because
now that I don't know.
yeah, because
That's a good question.
I was looking at that and I was thinking, okay, so maybe I don't clean my windows as much as I should. But you're thinking that's gone by then. And she talked like she cleaned hers daily, which was a little bit okay. I'm the slacker here, but
I
yeah,
don't
she
clean my
was getting
windows
rid of
daily.
that regularly. So for that to be there, so just speculation. Why do you think then that wasn't why was that not read more into?
I think that there is part of, when a law enforcement is working on a case, you can't just say, well, it's probable that this is true, or, this is
Yeah,
probably what happened. So maybe it was just like you can't prove that just because his fingerprint is on the window that the perpetrator entered that it was him. Um, that's that's a really, really odd coincidence.
I know. So most people would kind of try to cover their tracks. So wonder why there were no gloves. Like that strikes me as somebody dumb or arrogant or not thinking clearly at the time. Someone kind of delusional. I mean, you've got to be to take a child like this, and that's I guess they're saying she was raped before she was killed. I mean, just a little baby. Um, was there anything that alluded to him being that unwell? You think while they were dating, did she
Uh,
not
you know,
have a feeling?
I read that he was a drinker and he was an angry drinker,
Mm-hmm.
so that's definitely whoa, don't want you around my babies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I don't know. That would have been a big no-no.
But you can think somebody is a bad choice, and you don't think they're that kind of bad choice. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like maybe you see, okay, he's got an alcohol problem, he's violent, but you don't think this perverse behavior and to this degree. Maybe
Mm-mm.
she just didn't see that. But I'm thinking something happens at my house. Maybe they're checking everybody I know or anybody who might have been somebody in the past. Just didn't really understand that. It's easy to sit here and say that though, but
You know,
um,
the the family gave his name and said, "Hey, we suspect this guy." And I do know that there were some people that came forward. Another red flag. Some folks that knew him well said, "Hey, right after this happened, he changed his appearance pretty drastically,
Yes.
and he stopped wearing a hat."
Yeah,
And
he's not having
that was huge because he wasn't seen without a hat. He just wore his hats. And he stopped. So if you've got a little girl and it's in the news that a little girl is saying, "Hey, a man in a hat came into my home," and a man stops wearing a hat, that's a red flag for me. His fingerprint is there.
Yeah. And the fact that evidently it was like a cowboy or a Western type hat, I guess in the dark, it was not a ball cap. It was not like something somebody might wear every day. But I couldn't help but wonder, so was this the ex before the child? Because I'm thinking, wouldn't the child know, hey, he always wears that hat? Because that confused me. They said, well, it was weird he stopped wearing the hat. So wouldn't she have known that? I don't understand that part.
Yeah, I definitely had some confusion there. Like if she's sick. And so I'm thinking, if you are calling it a magic hat, then you may not be very familiar with that type of hat. Otherwise, you would say a cowboy hat or,
Mhm.
hat that somebody would wear when they ride horses. I don't know. But for her to
Yeah,
call it a magic hat, it was like, well, that's strange right off the bat. But then if you've seen that person wearing that hat all the time, wouldn't it be, oh, just like so and so wears?
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. There was no correlation. I don't know how she didn't put that together. But again, she's 6, she's sleepy, it's a dark room. Who knows?
Okay, but did you? So, okay, I'm going to get ahead of myself. So, we know it went unsolved for over 30 years. And then fast forward, we've got a new department and poof, answers. Poof, more questions. So, in 2021, when they began to look over the case again, and they went through like what, 3,500 case file pages, I think. Um, and they interviewed over 100 people. I think it was like 125 people.
Hmm.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, you got the inner circle, then a little bit more, then a little bit more. All they had to go was like 2 circles in or something, 1 or 2 circles in to begin with. That just kind of blew my mind. But in 2022, they arrest, Thomas Eric McDowell, and he'd been in a relationship, before that we talked about. But I cannot see where what that time period was. I've
Yeah.
missed some. There's a gap there.
There's a massive gap. He spent some time in prison because he was found
Mhm.
for he was arrested for the rape, went to prison, and even in prison he braggingly talked about killing a 4-year-old girl, hiding her body in a landfill somewhere. Um, Another red flag for me. It was like, well, you know, we have multiple things pointing back to him. So thank goodness someone new came in, reopened the case, started looking back into it. Unfortunately, though, Jessica's body was never found.
That just, yeah, that gets me. I don't know how you have closure in this particular situation. I don't know how you get to put the red check mark like, okay, this is 100% stamped, done. I guess they have enough information that they have to move on. I mean, he he not, did I miss something here? Was he not willing to tell where, what, when, why?
I heard two different um, conclusions. One
Okay.
was that he had offered the information um, in exchange for freedom, for being what's it called, where you're immune.
Yeah.
And
Exonerated.
that was, yeah,
Mhm.
and that was turned down, which that makes sense. You don't want to say, "Oh, yeah, just tell us where you hit her," and you don't have to pay for it.
Right.
That does make sense to me. But I also heard that uh, he had denied, even after saying, "Hey, here's a plea deal for you." He stuck with his not guilty verdict and said, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where she's at," even with the deal being on the table. So two completely
Well,
different stories. I don't know which is true.
Right. I thought the landfill story was weird for a couple of reasons. In prison, even the worst prisoners, they don't like you to mess with the kids. Like it's not a thing. I know enough of research and personal experience of people who have done time that they don't like that. Doesn't matter what they did. You don't
Right.
mess with the children. Why would this guy have bragged about that? That was peculiar.
Hmm.
And did he tweak it a little bit to say she was somewhere she was not because he just wanted to tell it, but he didn't want to tell the truth about it? I did wonder that.
Yeah, and I wonder because I the same as you, um, I've read over and over she was raped and killed, but we don't have a confession. We don't have a body. We don't have any eyewitnesses to any of the rape allegations. So how did that come on the table? Have you wondered that? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, pretend you're his lawyer.
Oh gosh.
Pretend you're his lawyer. What do you not say? Hey, what do you have exactly?
Yeah.
What do you have?
Yeah, you can't take it on speculation. So
So how is this?
yeah, we know there's a fingerprint, but he used to live in the home.
Mm-hmm.
We know there was male DNA on the scene in the house, but it doesn't lead back to him necessarily. It was not processed really well before, DNA technology has really changed so much. And it was just prior to that, so it wasn't processed well enough to be able to pinpoint, but they knew it was male DNA. But I mean, there's a boy living there. I don't even understand how that was a thing for them to use in court. But you've got a man who spent time in prison for rape. So, I mean, you've got negative marks against you. Maybe it was just easier for that jury to come to that conclusion. I don't know.
Yeah, did you think it was odd? And anytime that I'm bringing up anything like this, I'm not pointing fingers saying that this is this is this way or this is not this way. But did you think it was weird that the sister identified him with this many years later, but
In a
back
lineup.
then, but back then she couldn't, or she wasn't exposed to that. They didn't ask her, can you describe this a little bit more? Or she didn't say, oh, yeah, that's Uncle so and so that lives in our house when I'm two. I don't know.
Right.
That's just, it all seemed weird to me. And so, what was so perplexing, I guess, the whole thing to me to wrap it up on my end is that you've got a case that seems cut and dry. And why was it not handled years ago? Then on
Mhm.
the other hand, you got a case that seems, well, is it cut and dry? Like, how did that happen that he was, sentenced? I mean, he's got like one more hearing or whatever for burglary or something like that.
Sure.
Something
Yeah.
that's smaller in the scheme of things.
Yep.
So it's conflicting in those ways, right?
It is conflicting, and I think that people get so desperate for closure, that it's sometimes easier to overlook something that might be oh, wait a minute, that seems a little off, or maybe that doesn't fit just right. You start to build a narrative. And I think that, it's been so many years that there's probably some sheer desperation in it. And if the family is just honed in on that's who did it, I don't know. But the bottom line is someone has been arrested. There are sentencing that's being handed out. We've got two down, one to go. Right now he's got two life sentences, so he's not getting out. He's older anyway. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Um, if he did it, great. If he didn't, oof, people go to prison all the time that are innocent. We saw a lot of that when DNA testing really started to come together. But regardless, there's a mom who does not have a daughter, and that's heart-wrenching. That's heartbreaking for the entire family. They will spend the rest of their lives, even if the conviction is in, that doesn't change. That doesn't make their hurt go away. And you just feel just saddened.
Yeah, it's we've got the luxury of looking at this from a distance and looking at all the peculiarities, but this is somebody's life, and I cannot imagine or I can, and that's what's so bothersome about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
Well, that's about it on this time, right?
that's
Like I
that's a
could go on
wrap,
and on. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got some good stuff coming up.
That's what I kept
Like
thinking of. Yeah, I kept thinking of our future stuff, and I'm like, don't pull that in. Don't pull it in. We're gonna
I'm
make
so
them wait.
excited about it.
Yeah, we're gonna
So
make them
excited.
wait for a little bit, but it's coming.
Well, well, if you love our podcast, we want you to subscribe for sure. We want you to share it with a friend. If you have something curious you'd like to share or an idea for maybe an upcoming episode, we would love to hear from you. You can send us an email at ourcuriouspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and we will see you in a week.